Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mental Health Matters, the podcast that breaks down stigma surrounding mental health. We want to make mental health okay to talk about around the dinner table, around the water cooler, wherever you're at. We should be able to be open about mental health. This is Tom Duff. I'm the executive director of St. Louis Counseling, therapist at heart, but I also love this business side. So please, as always, if you're a new listener, share the podcast. If you're an old listener, share the podcast. Go to our social media pages. Like us. That's one of the best things you can do for free. All that stuff's for free. Just click, like us, share us, do whatever you got to do. So as always, we have entertaining and interesting guests, and today is no exception. We have Arica Foster, who is with the Kranzberg Arts Foundation here in St. Louis. Arica, how are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It is cold as can be outside, but the sun is out, so that makes me a little bit happier on the inside, I guess.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I got a haircut, so when that sun
And
hits
it's
the
nice
back of my
too.
head. Oh, that looks nice. Okay, thanks. But yeah, it hits the back of my head. I'm like, man, that's warm, because it's pretty cold out there for a short haircut. But I'm excited today to be talking with you because you're the community engagement manager with Kranzberg Arts, and I think it's going to be an interesting conversation because you have your hand in a lot of different things, and a lot of it has to do with our overall mental health, right? So, with Kranzberg, how long? Well, one, how long you been with Kranzberg, and then what exactly do you do as their community engagement manager?
So I've been with Kranzberg now for 6 years. Um, Basically, as community engagement manager, I kind of touch all the different venues that we have in the infrastructure here in Grand Center, which is now about to be 8 venues.
Oh,
Um, Primarily, we started at the Kranzberg Arts Center, which is located on the corner of Grand and Olive.
hmm,
Kind of beginning with, and I'll put that out, the
yeah,
Wednesday night jazz crawl,
uh-huh,
which is something that I think the community engagement aspect really kind of developed or stemmed from there. Just being there weekly and being able to talk to the community about other things that we have going on in the different venues here in the district. So cross pollinating,
hmm.
um, working closely with the different artists that we have, the different musicians, and bringing everybody together as a community within our infrastructure.
So what do you find passionate about working with these artists and bringing them together and bringing the public to them as well? What drives you for that?
I think just having a platform or a safe space where people can come together and the musicians, that part I hold close and near and dear to me. A lot of people in my family are musicians or singers, so creating a platform or opportunity for people to express themselves and then connect with an audience is very important for a musician or artist. So being a part of the foundation to we're infrastructure for that to
Hmm.
bring music and talent and artistry and a platform together and being the conduit for that, that's is really powerful.
Hmm.
So that's the main part I appreciate.
Nice. And then the weekly jazz crawl. What's that?
So we have 3 venues here in Grand Center that there's we start at KDHX from 5 to 7.
Hmm.
Then we go to the Kranzberg Arts Center from 7 to 9. Then the dark room that's in the Grandel Theater from 9 to 11. The first hour of each of those shows are a professional trio, or maybe sometimes a quartet or a solo.
Uh-huh.
But the professional musician has that time where they either share some of their original work or, of course, music that we all know and love. I love each space because it has its own character and personality. It brings forth different sounds of jazz. The second hour of each set allows people to come and jam and, like be a
Uh-huh.
part of that stage or that opportunity, that community. So it's to further jazz, to keep that spirit alive here in St. Louis.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's pretty cool. And you always hear soothing jazz, right? So it's good for the soul. But music, right? And I mean, so I'm a big believer. I just love music, first of all. Like, I love all types of music and what it does and the mood that it changes. And there's science behind how it changes the endorphins in your brain and it can change your mood. Um, but, you're a musician yourself, right? Singing as well as some instruments, right?
Hmm.
What's that do for you when you can express yourself, or what's that do for your soul, so to speak, or your mental health? Since this is mental health matters, got to work
It
that in
is,
too.
yes. It's a mental release. I feel like when I have the opportunity to get on the stage, and it's not so much about wanting to create a fan base or entertain for me when it comes to singing. When I sing, it's more like I'm just releasing something that's in my soul or my spirit, and what comes from the heart reaches the heart. So typically, there's a reaction there. But then there are some singers and entertainers, musicians that there's so many different
Mm-hmm.
aspects to that. But for me personally,
Mm-hmm.
it's the release.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's through singing, yeah, you said musician. I play a little trumpet, and it's been a
Uh-huh.
long time. I would love
Uh-huh.
to pick that back up, but it's just that and being in the moment, and just being vulnerable and being able to share with another person or audience or community. Um, you never know how they may affect another person, but it's a great release
Uh-huh.
for me.
Yeah, yeah, and what it does for the mind, the body, the soul. I mean, and that's at times, when we need our own healing and we need maybe even a bad day, and maybe it's just turning, for some people it's just turning up the radio, right? Or maybe it's not the radio nowadays. What music you're streaming makes me sound old. Just got to tune in the radio. But the reality is, like, maybe it's just that. But for people that are that level of artist, and sometimes, dance like nobody's watching. There's that whole phrase out there with that. But that's
That's
true,
real.
right? That's
Yeah.
real, right? And it's just, even with kids, you can see that as being a core, like there's just movement, right?
Mhm.
And what that does for them. So it's neat to see. Now, something else you started, and it's probably about 5 years ago, right? Pace. So let's describe that and explain that to everyone, because this is pretty cool stuff, and I think it's cutting edge stuff that you're doing as well too.
Oh, nice. So PACE, I broke that word down. The acronym is for Performance, Art, and Creative Expression. And so, with PACE, that kind of goes back to music. It's creating a rhythm, and I feel like PACE is, or it has been shown. I started February 2020 will be 5 years for PACE, and it creates a rhythm for people in your life, but through an artistic way. Again, with that release, and then also for an audience to come in and be healed through the arts. So PACE is a movement, and basically what we do is go from different venues and platforms and bring in different forms of artistry. Um, it's typically a collaboration of people who wouldn't typically be on the same ticket
Uh
or,
huh.
the same platform. So that brings in different demographics of people. And, there's a lot of healing even in the audience because of that.
Hmm.
People coming together that typically wouldn't. Like, there may be a rock band or and spoken word, and
Uh
then
huh.
tap dancing and comedy on the same
Wow.
ticket, so that's bringing in different forms of artistry and different groups of people at the same time. So audience and artists bringing a platform for all of those people together.
So you can really engage, really anybody, like
Mhm.
all those kind of different genres, right? That is all being performed. And also, we were talking earlier about attention span. We live in the world today of attention span, but it's like four different areas. It's like it keeps your interest as
Yes.
well too.
Yep.
Now, how often are you guys able to kind of get going with that, or how often can you guys find a venue to perform in?
So in the past, typically I have four different performances or create four different sessions in the year.
Hmm.
The first one being February, which is the anniversary. It was inspired actually through the time period here with Michael Brown
Mm-hmm.
in Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
And right after that, I was speaking with our executive director about some type of programming in the art center for the community at large because we were experiencing a very traumatic, event in the
Mm-hmm.
community. So he mentioned, well, maybe 28 days of healing because it was in February. And I said, I like that, but I feel like this healing process may take longer than 28 days.
Uh-huh.
So we just began in February, and each Sunday in February, I always do it. Whatever programming we have is on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's more of like a fellowship time, a family time.
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up, we would go to Sunday evening service.
Mm-hmm.
So there was another aspect of my family being extended to our church family and just getting together through music and being uplifted through some type of the word given to us and then food. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've kept that concept and I do it typically on Sundays and it's called a Family Sunday series. So February and June, October. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a cycle.
Yeah.
Every 4 months, we'll do something on a Sunday for the family to come together.
That's cool too, because it's not just, adults, but it's family,
Family.
right? Oh, wow. So when people are in the audience, I'm like, what do you feel that vibe? What's that vibe they're bringing in after they're watching some of this healing?
It's always very exciting. The most recent gathering that we had was in Strauss Park here in Grand Center,
Mm-hmm.
which is right outside of Jazz St. Louis, across the street from the Fox Theater. So people were coming out of the Fox from a performance and going into Jazz St. Louis. And for us to be right there in the park, and at the time, there was a jazz ensemble from Riverview called
Mm-hmm.
Point of View Jazz Ensemble under the leadership of Harvey Lockhart.
Mm-hmm.
So these young kids were on the stage just singing and performing, and they had this massive, just crowd of people to come that they weren't, I'm sure, expecting at the time. And a lot of them stopped, and they
Wow.
were just a part of it and they took it in. And just to see the smiles on their faces and the younger kids being inspired by these kids on the stage, it's always just such a satisfying, like
Mm-hmm.
a very gratifying
Mm-hmm.
experience for me to see.
Yeah. Well, and it makes, like when you talk about the arts and whatever it may be, right? Like music, different genres of music, art, painting, comedy, whatever it may
Hmm.
be. But it's like it makes people stop. So like that example right there, like we live in this busy world, and a lot of times we're not even looking at each other in the eye when we're walking down the street. We don't say hi, but it's like stuff like that makes people stop in their
Hmm.
tracks, and then pay attention and slow down and feel that moment at that time. So that's really cool stuff, especially that example of being in the park and getting those mixed crowds walking
Yes.
by. Yeah.
Yeah. But the
What?
one that music like stopped everyone,
Mm-hmm.
at some point at an intersection to say I want to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So music is definitely a universal love language.
Well, and you think about how we get together, right? And we have there's so much focus on the difference, whether it be political, whether it be race, whether it be gender, whatever. But like music, a lot of times, or the arts, like it brings people together,
Mhm.
and you look at that. And sometimes people say it about sports as well too. But it's like when you really think about the arts and music, it bridges gaps,
It does.
and it's like, what can we learn from that to better off our everyday lives, you know? I don't know, but it's like, oh, anyway, I'm getting all fired up again. Um, uh, Pace. So, like, you felt that the formation of that come after Michael Brown,
Mhm.
right? So, how did you feel? Like, what do you think was that driving moments for you? Like when you realized, kind of the crisis St. Louis was under, right, and even the region, and even how the media portrayed Ferguson on some levels as well too. But like, what was driving you to say like, I got to do something? What?
Because it was very relevant to me in my life. Um, I recently experienced a cousin, the only cousin that I had on my father's side, to be murdered. And it was not through the gun violence per se, as far as a policeman,
Hmm.
but the reality of losing, these young men and young people in
Hmm.
our community, it really it stood up in me
Hmm.
because overall we're experiencing trauma,
Hmm.
as a community, not just in our individual homes, but it's affecting everyone. So um, I don't know that it was almost like a mandate that fell on me to say I had to stand up
Hmm.
and create something, for the community to begin a healing process because I know um, healing is necessary right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what it's. And I applaud you. I'm doing, air applaud. You can't see that on a podcast. But you took action, and you realize where action could be taken. Because sometimes we feel helpless or like, what do we do? But for you, you took action and and under the prize of healing, how do we heal? Because that's such a core principle when you look at life, spiritual, even not spiritual, like how do we heal from situations in our life and what are the steps taken, and there's outlets and the arts is an outlet,
Hmm.
and that can reach so many different people, so that's awesome. That's, and your drive as well, of course. And when you talk about trauma and trauma's everywhere, right? But St. Louis, if you just look at the different levels of trauma we've had over, really, I mean, just going back to 5 years ago, starting with Michael Brown, right, or a little over 5 years. Um, I mean, look at everything that's going on in the city, in the county, in the region. It's like there is so much going on,
Hmm.
and there's different levels of trauma that we've all experienced. But until we, as a community, try to find some common ground, which could be the arts,
Hmm.
and that's where we can maybe find some commonalities and appreciate each other as well too. Because I think that's the other problem. We don't appreciate. I'm going off on a tangent myself, but we don't appreciate just being a human being and being a
Hmm.
person and finding those core commonalities of compassion and care, because that's, I really do think people want to do good, like I come from that standpoint. It's like people aren't born to do bad or to make bad choices. It's like people ultimately want to do good, and I think we all need to remember that,
Right.
you know.
Hmm.
um, so off my tangent now, but the other aspect is of you, beautician, right?
Yes.
Also hair and makeup, right?
Hmm.
But so a lot of times, as a therapist, we know that a lot of times some of the best therapy happens when someone's getting their hair done, right?
Yes.
And so I remember a couple of years ago, we were actually trying to get a grant to help. We're working with a city or a church in North City, North County, both really, but try to get a grant to help teach trauma 101 to beauticians and barbers because, one, they're hearing a lot, but two, also, how can how can we help educate and understand trauma better on all
Hmm.
realms? Because sometimes that's where people feel comfortable. But so my question is when you're in the salon, right? Isn't that a great place for therapy to
Oh my
occur,
goodness, yes. I
right?
call it salon therapy.
Salon therapy, right? People just more comfortable.
Hmm.
So I guess like what would you want to know more about, or what are the things people are sharing, without going into detail, but what are they willing to put out there when they're inside that world of salon therapy?
So it's been a while since I've been on a consistent basis in a
Hmm.
salon now because I've been working with
Kranzberg.
the
Hmm.
foundation now for a few years. But before that, like people would talk to you about any and everything.
Hmm.
A lot of my clientele they had began to be with me for like 7, 10 plus years. I service kids that ended up graduating from high school and
Wow.
college, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's relationships are established. I feel like in salons, and once people feel like they can trust you, and I think in the beginning, it's not necessarily them feeling like they can trust you with their life or their information.
Mm-hmm.
They're trusting you with their hair,
Yeah.
and that's a very vulnerable place to be in. You're
Mm-hmm.
laying back, someone's touching you, and
Uh-huh.
it's very intimate, one on one. And so that just creates this another platform or opportunity for conversations and communication to happen. Um, but at the last time I was really consistent in salons, things that were talked about, it was a lot of things in schools that were taking place. Like I had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of moms who were concerned about I don't know how easily kids were diagnosed with behavioral
Oh.
problems and
Mm-hmm.
issues. So at that time, medication was a big conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Should I, stay natural with them, or should I take this on? What is it?
ADHD,
ADHD.
ADD,
All
yeah.
these things
Mm-hmm.
were a big part of conversation. So um, therapy was a
Uh-huh.
big conversation. As far as especially in the African American
Mm-hmm.
community, which my clientele I try to keep wide open because hair is hair to
Mm-hmm.
me and
Mm-hmm.
people are people. But in the African American community, therapy and even having a conversation with people outside of your family or your your circle,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like taboo.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big part of those conversations, therapy,
Uh-huh.
going to seek counseling to, get the information that maybe they needed
Mm-hmm.
for their kids. So yeah,
Yeah.
kids
Mm-hmm.
and therapy
And
or
therapy.
help for the kids that was the big conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's almost 7 years I just mentioned.
Yeah.
That's almost a decade. So where has that conversation changed now in the salons,
Yeah.
to get support for family help?
Yeah. That's a good point. And what a great place to reach people too,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, you're right. Cultures approach therapy in very different ways. And I always say, coming to therapy, it's like just going to an objective third party listener, that you can just bounce stuff off of, not feel judged. That's confidential as well too, because that's the other thing is trust.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about that, it's like, yeah, that vulnerability, which makes sense, as you were saying, I was like, that makes perfect sense. You're sitting there and your hair, yeah, your hair is really important. Like, I mean,
Yes.
think about that. Like, as
Mm-hmm.
you get older, when you're a kid, like at first you don't care about it, but then the image is everything. And then when, I mean, you get, you're proud when you get a haircut, and all that. And so then having someone you trust to do that is really important. And so
Yes.
then that relationship, and that's the other thing, everything's about, to me, it's all about relationships, how
Absolutely.
anything is possible with relationships. And so having that relationship, and then lo and behold, you start trusting, then you start letting those things out, because then you're not ashamed to say like, oh, my kid's on medication, should I keep
Mm-hmm.
him on medication, should I not, what do you think? um, so yeah, it's a great avenue to be able to reach people.
Empower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're giving me a lot of ideas. If I set up shop in barbers and beautician shops, I mean, we could do a lot of good business going there,
Absolutely. For
right?
sure.
Go on back to the other room and see the therapist, and go out there and get your hair done.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a lot. That could be. Hopefully
Okay.
no one's listening to that. My competition's not listening to that.
It doesn't matter. They won't have the same vibe.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I love it. Um, so what are your hopes for the community, right? Um, when it comes to the arts and healing, like what if you could paint your picture on what you'd want to do and the impact? Like, what's some of your sort of dreams, so to speak, where we could use the arts in healing hand in hand with some of the major issues we do have in St. Louis?
So even beginning with hair and makeup, a lot of people do not view that as artistry. They look at it as a service,
Mm-hmm.
which it is a service, but it's an artistic service. Like you can change someone's whole opinion of how they view themselves, by one session,
Mm-hmm.
changing their opinion, their appearance or their image,
Mm-hmm.
So I really would love to see more brought into the artistic world through um, hair and makeup.
Mm-hmm.
It helps with self-esteem. It helps with um, there's so many people that are experiencing alopecia and cancer.
Mm-hmm.
The effects of the side effects of the medication through
Mm-hmm.
cancer. Just so many different things now are affecting our appearance, which affects our mental.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like if we can, I want to create not so much a platform for the high end of fashion and
Mm-hmm.
beauty, but just to allow people to feel good about themselves, like
Mm-hmm.
everyday people.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
There's a song about that. Yeah, anyway, keep going. Yeah.
yeah, but I would love to be a part of like creating some type of synergy with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, like I said, music is it's a universal language.
Mm-hmm.
Food is a universal language. The culinary arts are not as pronounced, I feel like, as they should be. Um, Not only does food affect your physical, but depending on what you take in, it affects
Mm-hmm.
your mental, of course, as well. Um, and then just how pretty it is when you prepare certain foods and
Mm-hmm.
bringing out the beautiful colors in fruit and vegetables, those type of things. Like I know they
Mm-hmm.
might seem a little different for this
Uh-huh.
conversation, but
No.
so these are the parts of the art industry or world that I would like to see more
Mm-hmm.
pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That makes total sense, when you talk about that. And, I think even how we as a society need to recognize what is art. And I mean, really, and, art's in beauty's in the eye of the beholder, art's in the eye of the beholder too. And maybe we need to open our minds up a little bit more, and like just talking about hair and makeup, like the way you started that is like what that does for people is I'm in another lifetime, it feels like I used to work in treatment centers with kids and then giving them a haircut and teaching them just some basic hygiene,
mhm.
like the smiles, like when they look at
Yeah, the
themselves in the mirror.
confidence.
Yeah, the confidence and realizing that's an art and what it does for people.
Yes.
Food, yeah. Yeah, I mean
Mhm.
now that's my game if we're going to start talking food, but I mean that alone too is like not everybody can. And that's the other side is recognizing the talent in people
Mhm.
when they do those. Like you said, a lot of people think of this, the food service, the hair industry. It is an art
It is.
because not everybody can do that. Trust me, I've had some bad haircuts over the years,
Mhm.
as well as some interesting meals in different places. But the reality is, yeah, I think we need to open our minds up to art, and
Absolutely.
then what it does for the body and the mind. So awesome. Well, we've been listening, and let me also say, it all comes back to the mental health, right? When you talk about what art does, music, and all the different levels of it, it all comes back to us and our overall mental health. And my thing is always we all have physical health and we all have mental health. Don't think, when we hear mental health, it's like, oh, I don't have mental health issues. No, we all have mental health. It's just like our physical health, right? And so I think we all need to be reminded of that. And some of us are dealing with a mental illness. Some of us have to deal with an emotional health issue. We're dealing with trauma, but we all have mental health. So when we can appreciate different parts of our everyday lives, to slow down, to stop and listen,
Mhm.
and realize what that impact it does, we're all better off
Yes.
in our daily lives. So, Erica, it's been a pleasure to getting to know you a little bit more today.
Likewise.
And with Kranzberg Arts Foundation, please check them out as well too. The Jazz Crawl and that's a weekly Wednesday event,
Yes.
right? So that
So
sounds
it's
really,
today.
today Wednesday. Oh my gosh, today's Wednesday. So you're ready to roll for the
I'm
night,
ready.
right? So that's a wonderful opportunity as well too. After a long day of work stress or just life stress, go on out and enjoy Jazz Crawl, right?
Yes.
So
All
awesome.
ages. It's free. Each venue, like I said, has its own personality. Typically at KDHX, you may hear sounds from TJ Mueller. It's more like that 20s sound, ragtime.
Uh-huh.
Very cool. I love the ambiance in that space. Is very intimate. It's a very cool like happy hour
Uh-huh.
time. Then at Kranzberg Arts Center from 7 to 9, it's very family oriented. We've had, I think, the youngest person I've seen on stage was like 8 years old. He was super
Wow.
cool, yeah. And then we have a lot of older people in that community, that setting that comes in, and so they've been around the jazz community for a long time, and they're considered like mentors, you
Oh,
know.
wow.
So it's really great to see the different dynamics and the different demographics of people that come in and celebrate that genre of music together.
Uh-huh.
Then at the dark room from 9 to 11, that's more the laid back.
Mm-hmm.
But each week the sound is different there, but it's more of a progressive sound, more contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really great ending for Hump Day.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
nice. Awesome. And that starts at KDHX
KDHX 5 to
5 to
7,
7.
Kranzberg Arts Center, which is at the corner of Grand and Olive from 7 to 9. And then it concludes at the Dark Room in the Grandale Theater in the lobby area from 9 to 11.
Perfect. So get out there every Wednesday, go enjoy it, do some relaxation, take care of your mental health. And Arica Foster, it has been a pleasure, and we'll be talking soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
All right. This has been Mental Health Matters. Tom Duff. Check us out at stlouiscounseling.org. Until next time, take care. See you later.
This has been Mental Health Matters with Tom Duff of St. Louis Counseling Services. Check out stlouiscounseling.org for more information.